Welcome to the Music Lounge. How is everyone doing today? Perry,
I am
what's going
doing
on?
fine, Andrew. And fall has finally happened in New York.
Yeah,
So,
leaves
yeah.
are everywhere. It's cold. There was some news this week, right, about MTV in the UK and Europe shutting down their digital channels.
So, the funny thing about that is, it seems to be that it's being reported as MTV is shutting down, which is obviously not true,
Misleading.
but it's the digital channels across the UK and Europe. And, we've said this previously. I think that this is sort of a harbinger of things that might happen in the US.
Well, it's, the acquisition with Skydance that they have to cost $500 million,
Yeah, it's
right?
crazy.
So it's
It
got
is
to happen
crazy.
somewhere. But let's introduce our guest and maybe
Absolutely.
she can weigh in.
One quick moment before I do that. For anybody listening, please like, rate, review, and share the podcast so that we can continue doing this for you. And today's guest is Ricki Askin, who is formerly music supervisor of News and Docs at MTV and is currently consulting in the music supervision and licensing space. Welcome, Ricki.
In
Thank you.
Paris.
In Paris, yes.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you.
You too. You too.
Amazing.
Thank you for joining us. What time is it there, actually?
It is a little after 6 p.m. So there's still some
We
light
tried
out.
to schedule this so it's,
I
not past
appreciate
dinner
that.
time.
I'm getting used to evening meetings and I can't complain. It's okay. It's worth
All
the
right.
baguettes.
And you only just kind of got there, right? We had a little scheduling Wi-Fi
Yes.
thing last
Apparently
week.
Wi-Fi is not as of course it's common, but I was staying in Airbnbs for a few weeks before I got an apartment. So I'm here for a few months. And I'm grateful that you rescheduled me. But I've only been here for just under 3 weeks.
So is Paris somewhere that you've been before? Do you speak the language?
Or so one would hope. My brother lived here for 8 years. And so pre-COVID, I was
Nice.
over here visiting a lot, especially when I was living on the East Coast in New York. I was also able to take a lot of work trips and squeeze it in when he was here with his family. So I kind of just took a leap at a time when I'm lucky enough to be freelancing and consulting and can be anywhere. It felt like a rare and finite finite timeline that I'd be able to pull that off. So I am learning. I took French in high school, but that hasn't served me that well. So I'm about to start a more intensive class in 2 weeks and hope that I can blend in a little bit better.
I think the language comes back. I took it in high school as well, but it is an entertainment and a fashion hub, and New York, London, Paris, the time difference is, like the world's getting smaller. It doesn't seem too far away.
For sure. I've already
Yeah.
met some music supervisors and hope to be able to continue to expand that network here as well.
So let's start at the beginning of your music industry journey. Take us back to when you were fresh out of college. Did you always dream of working at MTV, or was it more one of those things where just right time, right place, and things happen?
Sure.
We had a lot of guests that started in the temple, right?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah. Oh,
Fascinating.
yeah. Like Susan Natoli, I think
Wow.
Didn't Holly start in the temple also?
Yeah. Did Hopkins maybe? I can't.
Hopkins, I think. Yeah.
Robin?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
Oh
so.
my God, amazing. I don't remember that. So it was my dream. I had stars in my eyes. I was a huge teeny bopper. I was a bit of a late bloomer. My high school bedroom was plastered with NSYNC posters. I mean, I was such a dork, but I'll own it
Hey, we
because
just had an episode about NSYNC and boy bands, so
I mean,
we had it
I
covered.
haven't seen that one yet. I'm going to have to check that out. I'll spare you guys the details for my own ego, but I really wanted to work at MTV. That was a dream. And in fact, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I had some really great internship experience in college at, most notably at CBS Sports, and got a bit of a taste. So I got to go to the Super Bowl with them as a runner. And so I really had stars in my eyes and had a very challenging time getting that first job, as people still do. And someone had tipped me off that the temp pool that existed at the time was a great way to get your foot in the door. And so after applying for several months to different jobs, I went for the temp pool and was called in for a meet and greet, expecting that other people must know about this. It's going to be other young people trying to get in. It really wasn't. It was a lot of I mean, people my age now, but middle-aged people that just didn't want full-time work.
Mhm.
And so from that perspective, I have had a bit of advantage from the get-go that I was super ambitious and available at the time. And so pretty quickly, they were putting me on some pretty high-level assignments for someone that hadn't worked out of college yet. So I was really sitting at the desks of the top executives, Judy McGrath, Brian Graydon, Herb Scannell, who was the vice chairman of MTV Networks at the time. And so that was intimidating, but a really wonderful way to learn. And it was also cool. To be fair, I wasn't given much responsibility. I was often like babysitting phones. And so it was tedious, but I knew it was a means to an end. And so I held on. And I
Open
got
your
lucky.
ears and open your eyes, and you
Yeah.
just absorb everything that's coming across those desks, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
And honestly, there's no better education of how MTV Networks, and television works than working for those three people.
My goodness. I was so lucky. So I ultimately would hear or keep an eye out or have a little bit of a foot in the door for interviews. And I was able to land a position as an assistant for Marnie Black, who at the time was the SVP of the MTV communications department. I had had a brief stint with them as a temp. And so when something opened up, I interviewed and was able to lock it down. And I mean, I look back and I listened to Graham James' interview recently, who was in that team at the same time, but much more senior. And I just, we have to be so grateful, especially as my first job. I just had a killer experience there.
I think I was already in the music team, but, I started at MTV Corporate Communications in LA. So I knew Marnie and Graham
Yep.
from working in LA. And then I moved to programming, worked for Paul DeBenedettis, which was, he obviously reported to Brian. So we kind of dabbled in similar areas throughout our career. It's pretty cool.
When we sat, I mean, when we were lucky enough to be invited, when your team, Andrew, had artists come in, we sat in a lot of the same rooms. I was.
As working in press or working in press? Right.
In press. So,
Yeah.
I had to try to contain my excitement at all times because I really was full of excitement and gratitude at the time, just trying to catch a sneak peek at NSYNC on TRL or whatever.
That's fun. So were you ever able to go to TRL when they were there?
Yeah. So I was an assistant on I was an assistant on The Hills. I was an assistant on Real World, a PR, a press assistant, an assistant on a couple seasons of The Real World. And then I did ultimately assist on TRL. So that meant, greeting, as you guys probably know, greeting artists that were coming in if there was press or photographers that were coming, which there often were. So that was special and cool. And I just was the geeky teeny bopper.
So that's cool. So they assigned you to various programming, whether it was an artist or a cast member, you had to.
So exactly. So when the Hills cast came to TRL, I was with them. Again, I'm sure I wasn't the only one. And then like New Year's Eve, there's a lot of press for that party. So my first year, I think I worked the New Year's Eve, which is really cool when it's your first time seeing this Times Square from that perspective. Often double as either talent escort if there's press that they're going to see. And so, I got access to really, really amazing things at that time.
Yeah, we were reliving our credentials and how many different points of access you can have. But I feel like when I was working for press, you had like 5 laminates, you had a red carpet, you had a crew, whatever it was.
Backstage, yep.
Press really felt like you had access to everything.
And I think it's worth noting that at the time, as I'm sure we'll get to as well, there weren't as many big, important music-related events every year. So for the VMAs or even the movie awards, obviously movies, but for the VMAs was like one of like 3 big things in a year. So the magnitude and the importance and the eyeballs and, the magnitude of the talent that would stop by. I mean, they still get wonderful talent, but you're maybe seeing them a lot more places, right? Because there wasn't the social media, it wasn't even really YouTube wasn't even as big of a thing if it was even kicked off fully. So it carried just so much more weight.
So I was just going to say, you were talking about having these experiences working with people that you had only ever seen on TV or heard on the radio and whatnot. Your friends in New York at the time, were they jealous of the job you had? Did they get to go to things with you? When you're 25, 26, 27 in New York and you've got this access, that's pretty amazing, right?
23. I was like such a
Okay.
baby. Yeah.
You added a few years, Perry. She
Yeah.
wasn't that old.
It's interesting now that you asked that, I hadn't thought about that. Most of my friends did not at the time coming into New York. So my high school best friends were not in this space. So they definitely thought it was cool and they were happy for me, but I was the standout fangirl, I guess. Then I grew up in New York for 18 years from there. And most of my friends came from music supervision, licensing, etc. So there were more shared interest there in this space. But I mean, I would travel or see family and it wasn't lost. I got plenty of people that were like, oh my God. I mean, and so I was used to hearing it, but was able to stay humble. I mean, I was an assistant, so let's not get crazy.
And we've said that also, the amount that we worked and the hours that we put in,
Yeah.
the people that we surrounded ourselves internally were our family.
Yeah.
And we spent so much time together. It didn't seem like work. It was fun. But that became the network. And then your counterparts, whether it was at record labels or other companies that you worked with. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was your network, I'm sure.
I was just going to add that for me, when I would go to visit family and I would tell them about what I was doing at work, and they were like, I don't really understand that. Like, it was just such a foreign concept to them about like, wait, you deal with celebrities and talent doing what do you do? And I'm like, well, I
take them from A to B.
Yeah, exactly. And they're like, that's a job?
I get a lot of that's a job when I moved into music supervision. Like there's much more recognition for that role now. But when I started in 2008 at MTV, people were like, oh my God, someone gets to do that. And to be honest, when I decided that press wasn't for me, once I took MTV out of the equation and left the company and tried it elsewhere, I had an inclination that I really just loved MTV, which proved to be true quite quickly. And I went and I did some networking, not soul searching, figuring out what else I wanted to do. That's when I learned about music supervision. And I did get met with a lot of responses as I entered that space of like, oh my God, someone gets to listen to music or watch shows and pick out what goes in the background. So that's kind of continued through my career, which can be really fun at times for sure.
So when you left press, did you leave the company and come back as music supervision?
Correct. So I left go ahead. So I left for 7 months. I'd kind of hit the ceiling of an assistant and there wasn't, even though they were wonderful, there wasn't another opportunity open. And so I left and went to AOL and kind of knew that I would find out pretty quickly if I liked PR for PR, if I liked MTV. And within a week, I was like, I only like MTV out of this. So I actually was networking and trying to figure out what it was. And then 7 months later, after networking back at MTV, and because I had had a nice name for myself, when something opened in the news and docs division, I was hired as a music coordinator. And that's where I learned, the different variables for licensing, how to negotiate music licenses, how music rights work, and then also how to audibly, because I'm not musically trained, how to listen. As an example, True Life was a show I supported on, and I had to listen to like thousands of hip hop beats, like from music libraries. And so I was able to pull like for different moods. And so that was a really wonderful place to learn and show to learn on, because it wasn't popular music. And so I had to hone in and understand the difference of different instrumentations and what kind of moods. So I got back in the building after only 7 months away and spent another 2.5 or 3 years learning and working on like some epic news and doc series, or like Cribs and True Life and My Super Sweet 16.
So I only know music supervision from Rochelle's team.
Yes, same team.
So same team, but what other internal teams had their own crew? Like, I didn't know News and Docs had their own.
I worked for Allison Thiel, who taught me the ropes.
Okay,
She and Rochelle both worked under Joe Cuello, if I'm not mistaken. And so I think that we were unique because we were the only music people on that team that were in New York. Because most of the shows, if I'm not mistaken, this is going back a long way, were produced out of LA. And so I don't know, obviously in LA, I think they all sat under Joe's team as we did, but we also, Allison dotted into Marshall Eisen at the time, who was the News and Docs exec, if memory's serving. Gonna like dust this off a little.
And were you the first music supervisor for News and Docs?
I was a coordinator. Allison, okay. I came up to be one by the end, but she was, I think she was the first music soup for News and Docs, and she had the lay of the land and was able to like show me the ropes.
But I think in the industry, it was still relatively new. And I think MTV is always a little further ahead than other networks. So to be able to support the artists that we were supporting on the music side and helping them with music in shows or a soundtrack, whatever it was pretty amazing, and kind of rounded out the support package that we could present to the labels. Yeah.
And the cool thing that they started doing, I think during my tenure, not long before, was the on-air chyrons that would tell you what you were listening to. That made a huge difference in both value and impact, because then
I miss that now, but I guess we have Shazam, right?
Right? It was pre-Shazam.
But I miss having those now. I would love to see.
And you had to go buy it somehow on iTunes, but obviously on iTunes as opposed to a CD. But there were still CDs. That's what the labels would send us for promo, right? It was a really wonderful way to give artists exposure and opportunity, because there was impact and it translated to sales. And again, it's important to note that the funnel was so much smaller then. The opportunities to break were smaller. So for MTV, which I take zero credit for, to be able to carve out another promotional lever that they could give credit for within the shows, and not just music videos and not just TRL, which was 10 videos, right? So now all of a sudden, the people that are tuned into the shows like The Hills or True Life get exposure to new artists, and hopefully,
I mean, the music is getting more exposure there than it would be in a block of music videos. So
right.
And then we would do a credit squeeze with like 30 seconds of the music video.
Yep.
So it would all kind of make sense to the viewer.
And on the music side, that was also one of the things that we could pitch to a label too, is say, listen, we can let Music Supervision know that, they could reach out to publishing and maybe use the music in a show or something. And I know we overuse this term, but it was this 360 environment where you were trying to give the labels and the artists as much exposure as possible in the real estate that we had. And that included, long form programming, which was important.
It's crazy to think, and keep me honest here, but you would have an artist for like, was it a month or was it a week that you would be, that you would, either was it MTV Push? I'm thinking of VH1, but like You Ought to Know, which is not an MTV property.
Push was, I believe it was a weekly, right, Perry?
Well, I wasn't there for Push. I was there for Discover and Download, which was a bi-monthly show, I think. Okay. Yeah. And so there was that, and then there was I don't know if it's called Artist of the Week or whatever it was, but it was pre-Push. It had a different name. I'm not sure what it was.
But it's just interesting because as the industry has evolved and everyone's attention spans have become literally milliseconds, this idea that even a week that would be given to an artist, is a really different time. So I think I relished in thinking about that time for a number of reasons, but it was easier to stand out as a channel. It was easier to make an impact in an artist's career because there wasn't like so much chasing the ball every millisecond.
Well, and it also was fewer places to do that too. I mean,
exactly.
MTV was, sort of the catch-all because they did have video programming, they had long form programming, they had MTV.com, they had MTV2. There were so many different places.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were so many different places where you could feature an artist and multiple artists too, and you could really break an artist's career. And that was, I mean, that was amazing back then.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that there's not that one place. I mean, obviously there's the TikToks, and then there's, streaming services, and, then the, like the Netflix and those people who do have music supervision, but it still feels more scattered than it was when it was sort of consolidated with them.
And there was a recent report, not to nerd out, but that these blips that are of artists that are getting signed for popularity on one platform or for one song are not actually translating to fruitful careers. And I think that, I imagine there's a ton of commentary on that already by people that are much more well equipped than me. But this idea of artist development has certainly shifted, or needs to continue to shift, to make these impacts more lasting than just a blip.
Well, I remember reading something very early in the pandemic when everybody was discovering music on these, on TikTok and other places like that. And labels were signing like hundreds of artists a week just so that they would prevent somebody else from having them. And I don't know if any of them became anything.
Yeah, I was going to say they were COVID bands that, artists got signed. And there's a few of them that didn't have any media training and they couldn't handle interviews. And then when the label wants to push and go touring and press and really put in a support plan, some of these artists just couldn't take it and ended up quitting and having a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
I suspect it will even out at some point, right? It was like this massive chase the ball over here and sign everyone that's blowing up on TikTok. And now,
if one breaks, you're good, I think.
The pendulum will even out a little bit. But it is sad. I didn't realize, that the MTV announcement in Europe, I didn't realize it was just digital channels. I actually thought it was their linear channels. So that's...
Well, I think digital as in what I used to program MTV Hits and Jams. It's those kind of channels, I believe.
The secondary, if you will.
Yeah.
Getting back to the music supervision, and you were saying, very few people sort of understood what that was when you started doing it. And I think it was like shows like The OC and Grey's Anatomy on a larger scale who got people to start paying attention to music in shows. It probably helped you because you were like, look if that's working with your artist on that show, do stuff with us on MTV.
Yeah. I think when you can also insert a band into a scene at a house party and a band's playing outside by the pool, that always helps too. I think the OC did once, maybe, or...
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm going to super age myself, but 90210 used to have artists at the Peach Pit.
That is true.
I don't even know that was before.
I was going to say, can you name some of those artists?
Jamie.
I can name one.
Go on.
Jamie. Go ahead.
Well, it was their first name, but it was Maroon 5 when they were Jane's something or other.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So Jamie Presley, who had a role in 90210, definitely performed on 90210, if I'm not messing up.
Wow.
He was Ray Pruitt. Where does this stuff live in my head? It's really a bummer. But yes, having artists see success in other placements. So again, dating myself, in the late 90s, Moby got a lot of flack. Moby was one of the first artists for licensing his music and ads. I still think that people look at him a certain way for doing that. And then everyone realized that that's how you make money. That's how you get exposure. That's how it translates. And so the more kind of ammo that we had to show that there was impact, the better it was. I went on to work at TikTok most recently, and part of my job was talking to brands to try to get them to do cool things on platform with music specifically. And that job really trained me in my mind an approach around actually tying it to statistics. So there was a whole bunch of research done about the impact and retention of, brand retention in the nerdier side of things or the commercial side of things. and the impact of music drawing consumers in. And so that is always helps your argument when you're trying to get artists on board and rights holders on board to contribute their music to something.
Well, it's
So I
interesting.
think there was an article this week which I didn't read, but I think it was a little negative about how content creators use music to promote brands. So if they want to do a content piece on Lululemon and they pick their own music, so it's almost like content creators have too much too much music, and
Yeah.
they can obviously pick whatever they want, but sometimes it doesn't represent what the brand's kind of musical style is. Does that make sense?
So I didn't see that article I have some experience in this space, but
Yeah.
usually when a brand is hiring a creator, and it might not be 100% of the time, but my experience is when a brand hires a creator, the brand has to approve the spot before it goes live because of the
Right.
sensitivity. So there should
This
be
wasn't
guardrails in
hired.
place.
I don't think this was
Fair,
an influencer hired by the brand. It's
fair,
just
yeah,
someone doing their own video, which Lulu can't really
correct.
control. But if that person has a following and they're using
That's correct.
music, then it's
That's interesting because I'll have to check out this article.
yeah. Again, I
that's-
didn't read
yeah.
it, but I just read the headlines, and that was what I
Yeah.
got from it. But it kind of makes sense that
For sure.
brands can't control, but it's like brand advocacy. They want consumers to keep making content on their own to support the brand, but then they can really
I would think it would be akin
hurt
to
the
someone
brand.
just ranking, similar to just someone getting on there and dumping on a brand, right? You can't control what people are saying. And if
Right.
someone with a big following gets on there and just says, this brand sucks, like they don't have control over that. But I mean, I don't want to talk too much of this level of shop, but like there's creative ways that brands can hop in and try to be a part of the conversation and try to like either make fun of it, make fun with it, not of it, or reply to it. But yeah, no, that's what's crazy. I mean, I could get into a whole political thing, which I absolutely won't, but like, people have these platforms to say whatever they want. And so this is another facet of that.
You worked at TikTok as well. How do you think the relationship between artists and their audiences have changed from them being a community on TV versus now you have this whole social
Absolutely.
music discovery era?
Absolutely. I was thinking about this, and I think that, as I've been saying a few times, about the opportunities and avenues that artists or that people can discover music, or artists can get their stuff out there. We used to wait excitedly, especially before I worked there, but also after, to see what new music video was coming out. I mean, again, as a child, seeing Michael Jackson Black or White and the technology that he used. And so there was this limited funnel for artists to express themselves or test out new, whether it's artistry or actually technology. And that was how they reached their fans, and it mattered. Now, as time has evolved and technology has evolved in obviously social media platforms, the relationship to fans is so much broader and more direct, and the opportunities, therefore, to speak more directly to them are not limited to releasing a new music video, obviously. So I just think that it's broadened and raised the ceiling, raised the roof. I'm going to go with raise the ceiling. Raise the ceiling on artistry and expression, because you're not limited to a music video. I still think music videos are gorgeous and matter and are an amazing and important asset. But now you can hop on a TikTok trend. Like, how are you going to get noticed? I mean, some of that can be cringe, but like thinking about the different ways. So whether you're thinking of something new yourself and starting a trend, or making a wave, which of course in this climate is more and more challenging with the more noise that we hear, but you're not limited to like a music video or a live show, like whether it's the VMAs or your own tour. That's really, in hindsight, artists were quite limited in how they express themselves. And now there's just so much more room for them to express themselves.
Yeah, I think, it's generational as well. My daughter's exposed to new music on TikTok, and this could be months before I hear it on the radio or a playlist. My generation, I've discovered new music on satellite radio or streaming. So, and they still say that radio is still the biggest platform for music, discovery. So I think it's generational. It's interesting. I'd like to compare audio versus visual. Really, it's just Vivo and YouTube. Now, obviously, Spotify has video, so you could discover something that way. I think audio has kind of taken over with the music discovery.
I would think there's still an opportunity that now that we're talking about it, might not have been. Look, even when I was there and I started at MTV in 2005, people were already complaining that that MTV didn't play music videos.
Right.
And so, and it did at the time, relative, of course, to now. But it feels like there's still a subculture of people that would love to watch music videos. And in the mobile day, and like whether it's in TikTok, again, I speak more about that platform because I worked there, so I don't know the restrictions on others. But TikTok has a 1 minute time limit on music. So that wouldn't be a full music video. But so I think there's still an opportunity to evolve in that space a bit that maybe hasn't been fully capitalized on.
Do you think, though, also that there is so much content out there from different artists that you can say an artist has broken through, but are they going to have a career? Does one song make a career, or is it just a blip? Is music discovery today creating artists that we're going to know in 10 years? Or doesn't matter, it's disposable. When they put out their next song, you may hate it and never listen to them again.
I would venture to guess, and I hadn't thought about this before, but I would venture to guess that the percentage of artists that break through and have 5 to 10 year careers or more has not changed. There is way more being fed, that being heard and being known in a moment. But I would venture to guess, and I think it's too soon to tell in this. I think we need 5-10 more years at least before one could do a successful study on that. But I would venture to guess at the actual percentage that we retain, right? Because right now we can probably all name 20 artists that have been around for 10 years that are still making hits. And I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong. This isn't I'm not a researcher, but I don't know that that it's going to increase. So I do think there's a lot more people that look like they're getting a chance that aren't going to make it. Before it was again, through this funnel of the labels and who are they promoting? And that was the only way. So it democratized music in a way that I think, again, hindsight being 2020 and it not being my career, there's still more ways that I came up with Britney Spears. You had to look perfect. And while she had many talents, live singing might not have been the first one, right? She had to look perfect all the time. And just at the end of last year, I went to see Billie Eilish in concert in Denver. And she is just such an immense talent. And first of all, she's gorgeous, but the way that she presents herself on stage during this concert specifically, she was not dressing for any sort of anything that would have worked in my coming up. Trying to think of the most tactful. I'm a huge fan. So I'm trying to think of the most tactful way to say that. Because talent, I think, prevails is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. Because, again, I think I would assume most people discovered Billie Eilish through audio, not through visuals. And I think that also it's because, and you fall in love with the music, the art, the way the artist looks is sort of secondary. I mean, if you're a fan of Korn, you're not a fan because Jonathan Davis is good looking. You know what I mean?
Fair. Yes, fair. But
not that he's
different. I mean, again, I don't want to get anywhere controversial, but women are different.
Yes, absolutely.
And so again, it hits something for me, since that was how I came up thinking that was that Britney was the penultimate artist, everyone has their posters hung. And so it makes me happy to see talent prevail and matter more.
Absolutely.
I've got teenage daughters and there's no posters in their room.
What do you mean?
And I wonder how much of an appetite you can really give yourself to an artist. There's obviously so many more than, 20 years ago. And yes, you're a fan of a certain genre or an artist. But if you're a Taylor Swift fan and there's so much kind of content and Swiftiness to be a fan, do you really have that much? Can you give that much of yourself to 5 other artists the same as you would Taylor? You know what I mean? It's like if you're a massive Swiftie fan, how much can you give to
Sabrina?
Well,
Right.
I would say
They're not the
5
same.
other artists, maybe 3 to 5, but then, there's so many artists out there. You might just like a song that you hear because it complements a new Taylor song, but then, you're not going to go and listen to that album. You're not going to go watch visuals because Taylor and those first 5 artists that you're a fan of is just taking up so much of your time because there is so much more kind of content now.
That's interesting.
I don't know if I had a point to that, but I'm just,
It's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
Well, one of the other things I was thinking is, who was an artist like 2 years ago that had a huge, massive hit? Benson Boone. But
you love Benson Boone.
Honestly, I don't really even know his music other than that song.
Right.
And I mean, he's a great showman. And I think that when he performs that song, people get really excited about it and love it.
His whole album front to back.
But I have not done that.
And you've been a fan for years, right?
I have not been a fan for years. I didn't even know Benson Boone until That's Beautiful Things came out.
All right. It's at least a year, right?
But so what I'm saying is, this last album, I don't think had a single that was on it that reached the heights of Beautiful Things. I could be wrong. I don't think it did. So is he somebody who, had all these streaming records because of that one song that people fell in love with? Is he going to have a 10-year career?
I think he will. I think he will because he's a really, really strong performer. And so he has it in him. And I actually worked with his team on a project and can say that he is very intentional in what he's doing. I think the label is as well. And I think I suspect, or my 2 cents for what it's worth, is that they're putting a lot behind him and he's up for the challenge. Again, not this and $1 will get you a cup of coffee, but I do actually think there were some very strong singles on that. His performance is unique enough. And I think he is strong enough that he's not just some kid who blew up on TikTok. He actually can back it up. And I think that's the difference.
Absolutely. Which is why I asked the question. And it wasn't a diss to him. It was more of a, there are artists that do blow up with one single and then just kind of don't go anywhere. And it's like, I'm not trying to put him into that category. It was just a question of, as an example. So
that's what I also mean about generational is that you haven't gone and listened to the album front to back, being a fan of that one song and being a fan of any live performances that you've seen from him. So that's just a generational shift.
You don't feel inclined to go seek out more. You're like, well, that's a great song and that'll do. We're just ready for the next thing. I mean, we're all products of our environment and we're just getting fed the next new thing.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It makes sense. It is unfortunate. And I do think, back to your point that you were making before, Andrew, about space and about interest. If you're a super Swiftie, do you not have time for 5 other artists, or do you just have a revolving door of this single's good, but when it comes to how I spend my money and how I'm going to decorate my walls, or when I go to college, because I still did that, I'm devoting it to Taylor, but I'll continue to listen to the next big TikTok single. I don't have children that age, so I bet you have a fascinating time learning from that. That must be bizarre.
Yeah. It keeps me current and, my wife's in the industry too, so they get a lot of insight into these kind of artists through her, and they get exposure to these artists through her. So they've had a very lucky upbringing in the music scene.
And one of the things I also want to touch on is that you might be a Taylor fan and love her, but you can also sort of, and the funny thing is, you think of Taylor as like a young artist, and she's in her mid 30s now, right? It's not like she's like, a
20.
22-year-old girl anymore. But you've got the Olivia Rodrigos, the Gracie Abrams, the Sabrina Carpenter, who's a little bit older. All of these women who can sort of, I don't want to say, I think Taylor made space for them, even though they don't sound like Taylor, if that makes
Absolutely.
sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I love that because the women that you
Yeah.
just mentioned feel like they have longevity, like feel like they have the talent, the messaging, a lot of the role modeling, I think, but I have some different thoughts on some of it, but I think in general, it's just, and they have the talent, right? So you never want to see people like fawning over someone that can't back it up with a live performance as a music lover.
And the other thing
Really
too is
neat.
like I saw that like Gracie Abrams played Madison Square Garden, and I
That
was
was
like,
I was a little surprised, but her album was on my top 10 list of the year last year.
that kind of blew me away. I was kind of like, I guess I'm just not as clued into her fan base
Agreed.
as I
I felt the
probably
same.
should be,
I
and
felt the same.
I'm happy for her. I'm a huge fan of Noah Khan, and like to see him go from where he was to selling out 3 nights at Madison Square Garden was incredible.
That's wild. Yeah.
It is due to the fact of social media and streaming and all of that other stuff too, that obviously he's talented and he has good music and he performs well and blah blah blah, but all of this other stuff adds up. And
So you think an artist of his size, he wouldn't be as big as he would be without that streaming exposure? And if he was just relying on the MTV popularity, do you think Noah would be a arena artist or more of a...
Well, he didn't get mainstream radio play. He was on the alternative stations. He toured relentlessly. He was just one of those grassroots artists that sort of just builds his audience. But I do think that people sharing his stuff on social media probably is what really helped him build a bigger audience. Yeah.
Like, taking another lens at some things we were talking about earlier about the finite amount of airtime that an artist can have, to answer your question, Andrew, it would take a lot longer, I think, for Noah Khan, for anyone.
Yeah.
Become an MSG artist.
Yeah. What I did want to ask you both is, how much influence do you think the label's prioritization plays into these things? Because yes, the social media plays a huge role, but that's not, I'm curious what your take or knowledge on like a current day label influence for Gracie Abrams to be able to sell out an MSG.
Well, I think labels prioritize themselves on social impact and radio.
And then run with it, right?
I think so, yeah. Definitely. Yeah. If we take Chapel Roan, for example, she was booked at Lollapalooza on a third stage in 23.
Oh, and then headlined in
last year. When she got to her performance, she actually switched stages because she was so big, and she was the biggest artist last year at Lollapalooza. So when that was all happening, when they were booking these artists, they obviously didn't know how big they would be. I think relating back to a label's priority, that obviously took a massive shift as the year went on, and she was booking bigger venues, she was doing bigger appearances. That all comes with more money and budget, so they had to put all resources into someone like Chapel.
Wow.
Yeah, I think with Noah Khan also, I think the first 2 albums were well received. I don't think that the audience reacted as much as they did with Stick Season, but I also think it was, like you just said with Chapel Roan, it wasn't immediate. He built his, like, over the length of the promo tour for that album, he built his audience. Like he went from some Brooklyn Bowl or something to
Webster Hall or something.
to like an Irving Plaza to I know it's a big jump, but to a Radio City and then to a Madison Square Garden, and then like doing a couple of nights at Fenway. It was, but it was over the course of time. I remember I just heard the first song. I know the album had been out for a while, and I saw someone putting up Snipes all over 10th Avenue for the Sixth Season album. And I was like, now they're putting some money into him. Now something's going to happen. I know that Snipes on 10th Avenue aren't necessarily going to get millions of people to listen to this album, but it just means that somebody is now investing in him a little bit more than they probably were. Yeah.
I go to this little, I went a few times this summer, the local radio station here in Westchester, New York, the Peak 1071 does a beach performance stage. And this year they had some artists I can't even remember, but it was like 50 people show up and it's on the beach in Bribe and it's fun. The year before they had Noah.
Wow.
Perform at this thing.
How many people were there?
Probably 50, 100.
Yeah,
like
crazy,
it was,
right?
He was just on this little stage in the sand performing for the local radio station. Things move pretty quick, and that's probably similar with Chapel Roan. I mean, she was getting signed and dropped, I believe, for a few years, but she really wasn't on anyone's radar that was going to hit as big as she did last year. But
fan of both
crazy.
of those.
So, all right, I know we're having a great conversation, but from MTV, you went to Vice. So you went from this polished world of cable TV to, this new digital startup, which I believe had to be funded because they made a pretty big splash. But how was going from MTV Music Supervision to Vice, and were artists hesitant and labels on being featured on that programming?
So I started at Vice in 2011 when Noisy was launching. And the first year that Noisy existed, it was sponsored by Dell. So they needed to, it was like a one format digital channel that would go with artists on tour or see them live and do like 2 songs in an interview. So a single format. And so they needed to be buttoned up for that, considering that there was a sponsor. And so in that respect, the artists were small enough. Vice was very fringe at the time still. And the artists were small enough that they were usually on board and there were conversations directly with them. So that was fine. In general, the experience in getting people on board was a mixed bag, because if you were either a diehard fan that you read the magazine for years or that, they were a pioneer in the online video space, but also just, again, very fringe. And so you were either like a diehard fan, or you were like, what is this? Or this is a little left of center and I'm a little bit nervous about the content. Really, about 2 or 3 years into my tenure max, at the end of the first season of the Vice on HBO news magazine series that I was able to music supervise, that's when Dennis Rodman went to North Korea with Vice. And that was like on the front page of the Times. And that's how everyone that was not on the fringe that didn't know about Vice all of a sudden knew about Vice. And so for season 2 of that, there were artists reaching out to me through their representation saying, I'm, the Strokes and The Weeknd, like this was before Weeknd blew up, but like love Vice, would love our music, would love my music on there, like crazy. So I got to see it change. Again, I don't remember really pulling teeth. I think it came down to you're either a fan or like once in a while they'd be like, we think that you guys gentrified Williamsburg. We don't want to license our music. But that was like once or twice, once in a while.
Did it help that the internal team knew what they were doing and you had a bit of a reputation and,
Yes.
always helps?
I think oftentimes the programming, especially, it was often artist related content. And so the artists were often involved. I will say that being documentaries and often not being music focused the budgets were on the smaller side, to be generous about it. So the content really drove people's interest and desire. I wasn't at MTV saying, we'll put a chyron up, we'll tell you who's playing so you get the promotional value. I mean, again, it weighed a little differently when it was for the HBO series, which at the time was their only linear programming, and expanded on to be Viceland, which is now, I believe, Vice TV. But, the digital stuff, if there wasn't a direct tie into why would the artist participate, there was limits to what we could get in there creatively. But aside for a few people that had kind of personal vendettas with the company, which didn't happen terribly often, people thought Vice was cool, and it kind of, again, blew up while I was there. I started at 125 people there. Everyone was tatted and smoking cigarettes. I was still shopping at the Gap, gloating about TRL. Like, I just didn't exactly fit in. But at its peak, I think during my tenure, there were 3,000 people. So I was so lucky in that experience. It was a challenging place to work, but I got to see a lot and be on the cusp of a lot of really cool things.
And I think for the industry, it was almost like a breath of fresh air, because it was what MTV or the beginning of MTV2 was. And then there's not that many opportunities. And I think artists were looking for something a little edgy and not the norm to give their, and Vice was really it, I think, at that time.
Well, it was also right before both streaming and social media blew up too.
Yeah.
So
it was
I
the
mean,
perfect time.
again, your opportunities were a bit limited. So it was sort of like, here's a place that feels new and, as we've said, edgy. Like you said, not everybody felt like it was a place where they wanted to be, but enough people did so that it really resonated with your audience.
It was quite different. MTV was like the poppy top 10, at least like the main channel largely. And then Vice was really darker, and you're not going to have the top 10 on there.
Right.
And that was interesting pivot for me as a pop girly. I think, one of my challenges there, and understandably when looking through this lens, was to get internal credibility if I ever did, because I was coming from a more mainstream place. But that said, it opened my eyes and knowledge, et cetera, to different music. And I also got to kind of blend it a bit, even for, whether that's something anyone appreciated or begrudged.
Well, listen, I always think too, is that when you hire somebody to come in who isn't already part of, I don't want to say, it's not cult, but isn't part of the scene already, you're going to get a nice different perspective. And it really helps to broaden what you're able to sort of work on and expose. So,
I agree. TikTok actually did that as well, and it's slightly different. You're talking more culturally, but TikTok hired a little left of center. They don't like to hire people, or at least my experience was that they don't hire people that do exactly the role. So I moved into a brand partnerships in the music space role, and I was like, there are a lot of people that have been doing this for decades. Are you sure?
That's why we never got a call back, Perry.
Exactly. Every label relations position I applied to at TikTok, crickets.
I mean, I could say a number of things, but
That's
it was
all right.
more like, we like people that have slightly different experience. And I respect and appreciate that. I mean, it comes with a slew of other downsides, but it was a positive. It diversifies the intellectual strength for a position. So
Absolutely. So we're getting to the end here. So looking back at your journey from the temp pool at MTV to building global music teams, you've essentially had a backstage pass to 2 decades of pop culture. If you could go back and tell your 22-year-old self one thing about where the music industry was headed, what would it be? And also, is there one moment that just stands out above anything else that you've ever experienced in the music business?
Wow. Well, so I do think that when I was touching on, I think that my answer to the first part of that, what I would tell myself, is that talent prevails. And we've touched on that already. I think that's the good news, especially, and we haven't touched on AI, and I'm happy to not, but especially as things continue to evolve quite quickly, I do still think that talent prevails, artistry prevails.
Right.
That's not a catch-all, but I do think that brings me solace at a time of tumult in this space. That in terms of moments, there have been so many. We were so spoiled with crazy access. But what I think one of the most special, I was temping for VH1. So I was a temp for maybe 4 or 5 months. And I was temping for VH1. And a 19-year-old, I believe, Adele came in to promote her first album and performed in the corner near Rick Krim's office. I was not only an assistant, but a temp assistant. So literally might as well have been an intern. But I happened, right place, right time. She had so much stage fright and she just sat on a stool and performed. I don't even think there was a human with a guitar. I think it was a cappella. There might have been a gentleman with a guitar and sang a few songs from 19, I believe was her first album, right? And that you knew you were in the presence of something special. And it wasn't long after that everyone started to know her name. And again, it wasn't even the music lounge. It was the corner space with cubicles.
Remember, Rick had some good artists to perform that. One that stands out for me was the Lumineers.
Oof.
And, they're not as big as Adele went, right? But
sure, but yeah,
they're still releasing music after 15 plus years. And, there was some artists that literally, were just sitting on a stool with a guitar and,
amazing.
We had some good experiences, both in the music lounge and
out.
But I think, it's almost like the VH1 team had that gut instinct on supporting artists, and upstairs at MTV, it was more of a label push.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that. Absolutely. I think that was a nice, yin and yang isn't even correct, but a yin and yang. And one of the joys of being a temp were just some of the relationships that I got to meet across channel, but also those first 5 months, like when I didn't know what I was doing, to be able to have exposure to some of these like life affirming opportunities was really a special gift.
Yeah. Well, it was a special gift to have you on our podcast today.
Thank you.
So lovely.
And like I said earlier, I know that we went in a bunch of different directions that we hadn't planned on, but that's the best type of conversation, right? I
loved it.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Thank you so much.
We could do a part 2.
I'll nerd out on music and MTV history or MTV memories whenever you guys want. Thank you so much for having me.
All right.
Yeah. So thank you again. And for the people who are listening, please like, rate, review, and share the podcast. And we thank you for listening and watching.
And have a croissant for us in Paris.
For sure. For free. Thank
right.
you. Au revoir.
Au revoir. Bye.
Thank you.